First of all, I'd like to welcome all who have made a valuable effort to be a part of this seminar on effective communication. Once was told a story about Franklin Roosevelt, who often endured long receiving lines at the White House. He complained that no one really paid any attention to what was said. One day during a reception, he decided to try an experiment to each person who passed by or passed down the line and shook his hand. He murmured, "I murdered my grandma this morning," or "my grandmother this morning." The guest responded with praises like, "Marvelous. Keep up the good work. We're proud of you. God bless you, sir." It was not till the end of the line, while greeting the ambassador from Bolivia, that his words were actually heard. Nonplussed, the ambassador leaned over and whispered, I'm sure she had it coming." Again, we want to welcome you to this seminar on effective communication. It's in this section we will be illustrating the process toward effective communication by understanding the importance of listening. On your outline, we will notice the theme of this section: let those who have ears listen. The theme is geared toward educating us about misunderstanding or the misunderstandings of listening and conquering the obstacles of accurate comprehension, understanding listening styles. Developing an approach toward comprehending what is being said, and then moving toward the goal of being a supportive listener. And first thing that we want to look at when we look to understanding the effectiveness or being effective, being an effective communicator and understanding the importance of listening is learning the misunderstanding of listening. See, the first process of reaching our goal of becoming an effective listener and communicating well is understanding this misunderstanding. Most people assume listening and hearing are the same. However, hearing is the process in which sound waves strike the eardrum and cause vibration that are transmitted to the brain. However, listening occurs when the brain reconstructs these sounds impulses that gives meaning to these sounds, turning our noises, example, a lawnmower, traffic, people, conversation, different things, make noises, but we often, that we hear those sounds, but giving understanding to them is when we begin to listen, and that comes through communication as well. Listening is different from hearing. Listening and hearing are not the same thing, and this misunderstanding greatly affects our level of communication. Listening requires attending, an act of paying attention to the signal. A great example would be paying attention to an individual's wants or needs or desires or interests. Listening requires understanding, the process of making sense of the information. See, listening requires responding, consists of giving observation or feedback to the speaker, or observable feedback to the speaker. It's also important to know offering feedback provides clarity to the information and lets the other party know you are concerned. Listening requires remembering, the ability to retain knowledge. Some alarming news is we find, as researchers have discovered, that people remember only half of what they hear immediately after hearing it. So, listening does not come naturally. Listening takes effort, and not all people are good listeners. Writer Charles Swindoll once found himself with too many commitments to a few days. He got nervous and tense about it. He was snapping at his wife and his children, choking down his food at meal times and feeling irritated at those unexpected interruptions through the day. He recalled in his book, Stress Fractures. Before long, these things around our home started reflecting the pattern of my hurry-up lifestyle. It was becoming unbearable. I distinctly remember after supper one evening the words of our younger daughter, Colleen. She wanted to tell me something important that had happened to her at school that day. She began hurriedly, "Daddy, I want to tell you something." And I'll tell you really fast. Suddenly realizing her frustration, he answered, "Honey, you can tell me, and you don't have to tell me really fast. Say it slowly." I'll never forget her answer. Then listen slowly. See, we must understand, listening does not come naturally. It takes effort. We also must understand, in order to be an effective listener, we must be able to conquer the obstacles of accurate comprehension that stand in this way, or the way of accurate comprehension. In order to conquer obstacles to reach a set goal, we must first be aware of the obstacle. So, listening is hard work. God gives the birds their food, but He doesn't throw it into their nest. With that in mind, we're given all the information, but it takes effort and hard work to give meaning to it. This includes overcoming bad listening habits. See, overcoming bad listening habits, in this case, we will illustrate the obstacles of faulty listening behaviors that prevent understanding. Pseudo listening or imitation, or those who imitate like they're hearing. You know what? They give imitation. They're not truly listening. They give the appearance of hearing, but are truly not listening. Stage hogging, another faulty listening behavior we will name in a second, is also considered in part of this pseudo listening. Second is one example of this pseudo listening is the stage hogging. They turn their focus on themselves instead of sincerely listening. Kind of like in this not sincerely listening is kind of like the husband and wife conversation that is often mirrored, where the husband is sitting and he's got his focus on something else and he's nodding his head yes or shaking it no, and the wife is talking to him, and then when she asks, "What did I say?" or "What do you think?" he don't understand, because he was just given the imitation of listening, but really wasn't listening. Not to knock men and all, but that's usually how we use that. Another one is selective listening. These respond to the parts of the conversation or speech that just interest them. To give you an example of selective listening, let me share with you a story I heard about a medical doctor who was invited as a guest speaker to address a group of alcoholics. He wanted to make a demonstration that would be powerful enough to make people realize that alcohol was injurious to their health. He had two containers, one with pure distilled water and one with pure alcohol. And it disintegrated he put another earthworm, back up just a minute. He put an earthworm into the distilled water, and it swam beautifully and came up to the top. He put another earthworm into the alcohol, and it disintegrated in front of everyone's eyes. He wanted to prove that this is what alcohol did to the inside of our bodies. He asked the group what was the moral of the story. And one person from behind said, "If you drink alcohol, you won't have to worry about worms being in your stomach." What was the message? Of course not. Or was that the message? course not. That was selective listening. We hear what we want to hear and not what's being said. Another one is defensive listening. We take innocent comments of the speaker as personal attacks. An example, an individual thinks about how they appear to others and how they may be seen more favorably, how they may win, dominate, impress, or escape punishment, and or how they may avoid or mitigate a perceived attack. With this lack of concentrating on the message, the person may miss the meaning of the discussion in its entirety because they're focused on themselves. See, these people are usually distrustful, suspicious, and insecure people. Another form of listening may be ambushing, listening carefully but only because they are collecting information to attack what you have to say. Another one is insulated listening. These people avoid certain topics by failing to hear it rather or even to acknowledge it. These people almost immediately turn off to certain issues by the speaker. And the other style is insensitive listening. These don't receive the message clearly. They get part of the truth. They're not able to read between the lines or understand the information within. They take the message at face value. These people get their feelings hurt a lot because they don't read into what's being said. They just hear the initial part of the message. And the last one, as we said earlier, that relates to so many, is stage hogging. The stage hogging, these listeners turn the message around to bring themselves into the limelight. They are people with short messages that try to hog the whole meaning of the whole conversation. Another obstacle that we must overcome are the causes of poor listening. Some reasons for poor listening can be avoidable, but there are some reasons that cannot be avoidable, such as hearing loss. I know we've got hearing aids and things that try to or gives help to those who are hearing impaired, but there are those who cannot hear anything. So we're going to look at the causes of poor listening. The message overload is when a person is simply bombarded with too much information too rapidly. You ever been there? You ever had those people as they begin to talk and they begin to speak, and it's just like when they open their mouth, the well just begin to open up, and you think, whoa, too much information. This causes listeners to shut down and receive little or no meaning of the message. It's just too much. Rapid thought is where we think faster than the speaker is speaking. We have this ability that is built into us that we think faster than we speak. So we have to have that moment to where sometimes we have to tell them to speed up a little bit. Just kidding. But it is a moment where sometimes the speaker is not speaking fast enough or enough motivation in it to keep her attention. So because we think faster than we speak, it's hard to keep our attention span. Another one is psychological noise. Is when the listener is wrapped up in what is going on in their lives. For example, in other words, we are preoccupied with what is going on outside the conversation. We're preoccupied with what's going on in our job, or preoccupied with what's going on with maybe a health situation in our family or someone else. It may be anything. It may be worried about, or it can be an extreme of sometimes we worry too much about what's going on the ball game that evening or whatever, that we get preoccupied with our listening. We must learn ways to refocus ourselves to the message at hand. Another obstacle that we must overcome to be effective listeners is physical noise. Distractions like traffic or music or other speeches or other speech or gestures. To avoid poor listening, we must need to learn how to shut down or shut out distractions. I'll give an illustration real quickly. I was doing a study when we first entered the MIP, and one of the instructors, when she was teaching, and this is no making fun or tearing down anybody, she was a wonderful instructor. But what was going on when she was teaching, she would make this facial expression with her eyes, and her eyes would get real big, and all of a sudden you become focused on her eyes and you lose focus on what she was saying. And sometimes we must overcome these certain distractions in order to be effective listeners. Another thing, to be effective in listening and communicating well, we must understand listening styles. Not everyone listens the same way. Some people listen for details and specifics known as content-oriented listeners. These people are not interested in who's saying it, but what is being said. Some are more concerned about feelings and relationships with others known as people-oriented listeners. These listeners have a strong concern for people and their emotions. Others may focus on what will or must be done, what actions need to take place for a particular outcome, and they focus on when and who will be doing it. Some are more concerned with efficiency, known as time-oriented listeners. These listeners always are time-conscious. They organize their day with a time schedule. It's compartmentalized with time. Each section of their day is well scheduled out. They will listen, but they may become distracted when a session runs over their allotted time. According to Ronald Adler and George Rodman in their book on understanding human communications, whichever style you use, it's important to recognize that you can control the way you listen and to use the style that best suits you and the situation at hand. Fourth, we must develop an approach towards comprehending what is being said. See, our goal as an effective listener is to make sure we are comprehending what is being said. When you want to understand the other person, we use the approach of informational listening. In these approaches, we exercise patience by not arguing or judging prematurely and listening first. Have you ever heard the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover? Wait until you read before you judge. It's the same way when we're listening. We shouldn't prejudge, and we shouldn't look into the person or the individual standing and talking to us, but we must not even argue what being said. We should listen first, and we should grasp a comprehension of that, and we do that through effective listening, or approach of informational listening. Always search for value in the message. By listening with a constructive attitude, by listening to key ideas and asking questions. You've heard that phrase time and time again, that we should ask questions. The only stupid question is the one that's never asked. Or we should look or paraphrase. When we're listening, we should paraphrase what's being said, and even taking notes in order to evaluate correctly and understand the meaning behind the message. And that brings us to the close of this session of this seminar. Now we've learned to overcome the obstacles, and we've learned the different listening styles, and we know the importance of getting the meaning behind the message. At this point, we're aware that listening is not natural, and there are bad listening habits and obstacles to overcome to be effective listeners. When we search out our strengths of listening and become aware of our weaknesses, we can clearly develop a path to understand the other person. Let those who have ears listen. Brings us to our goal of supporting the speaker. It's the whole goal. Is when we understand the message, it begins to bring us in unity, and it begins to bring us into a relationship with the speaker, that we begin to understand them, and then at this point we're in a place that we can be supportive of them, and we can offer them advice, and we can help them through if it's a situation or whatever, or circumstance in their life. Having said that, support should be only given when desired by the other party. We should never force our way in or be an overbearing. Kind of sounds like stage hogging, doesn't it? This includes knowing when to offer your advice, your judgment, and how and when to comfort others. This concludes our seminar. And I pray and I hope that you found some beneficial avenues and paths and things that have been said to be a better communicator. Someone who is willing to listen, not imitate. Someone who is willing not to judge quickly or argue, but to listen and to understand the meaning, that we may support and help others or even ourselves.